Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software. I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, our Premier Solutions Engineer. Today, Dion is going to be doing an example, I believe, on connecting to SQL databases and a few of the new things in Alpha Anywhere that have to do with connections. But we're also here, of course, to answer your questions. So you can go ahead and type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. How am I coming through? Okay.
Coming through okay. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. Actually, you already are the presenter today. So whenever you want to share your screen, go for it.
Share. I'm the head
What
of an
happens
evil
when you log in
organization.
first?
Yeah, that's true. I'm in control here, fake Dave.
There you go. And there's your screen. I can see it.
Well, with us is Dave McCormick, who is not, related, but we have the same last name. He'll
Not
be doing
related.
the demonstration today. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah.
You ready, Dave? Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. We really enjoy having you with us each week. We want to say thank you very much for the people who send in questions. We're actually working on a couple of them for demonstration very soon. They came in from people on our guides at alphasoftware.com. So that's really, we appreciate it. Today, I'm going to actually shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about APIs and talking about a bunch of different really cool features that have been added to the system, but also the development environment itself continues to grow and mature. And I actually had a very interesting situation, I'll talk to you about in a few minutes, that actually showed me how kind of powerful the system was. And I'll go into a little detail in a moment. But that said, if you're interested and you have questions, which we hope you do, please go to your Q&A section of your GoToWebinar control panel and put your questions in there. And our crack team will be monitoring that and helping answer any of those questions that we can. If we can't, we'll get back to you. The goal is here. So we're very excited about having you, and we do want you to ask questions. So any questions on what we present, obviously we would like questions, and other questions that you might have. We do appreciate it.
And
so
I'd also
today,
like to add, if I
please.
could, that Sarah Mitchell has just joined us. She's in charge of the documentation department,
Excellent.
Which means that if you ask a question today, you'll get the correct answer, which is always helpful. So,
yeah,
as opposed to any other day. Yeah.
And I've noticed an uptick, which is really cool. When you're using our, let me jump over here. Come on, there we go. When you're using our documentation system that Sarah's done an amazing job of putting it together. Let's go, there we go. A little sluggish today. I'm not on that Mac Mini, I'm on my old one, so that's why it's so slow. But if you're on our documentation system, one of the cool things and features I think that's built into it, I notice I have it bookmarked because I'm there every day looking up stuff because memory's not so good there. So let me bring this up. So again, full search system. Come on, let's go, baby. A little bit sluggish, I apologize.
I know, nothing like GoToWebinars, the ball and chain on your computer.
This is not our documentation system, it's the system here. But at the bottom of every page, if you, the webinar or the documentation system is a live system. It continues getting enhanced with new features, new capabilities. We just had a current new release, which I hope everybody's very excited about. A lot of really cool features in there. Some we've covered, some we haven't. And we obviously are trying to make sure that our documentation is up to date at the same speed, and Sarah does a phenomenal job. But in our documentation system is an area you can report an issue if you have an issue with that page. So if something's confusing or if it's missing something or you notice an error or anything like that, please use that. And actually I've seen kind of an uptick of usage on that, and it's really helpful because you help us improve the documentation, which will have huge impacts on other developers and other people who are using the system. So again, if you see any issues with it, go ahead and report the issue. Also, I just like from the top page, which is important, is we have our full video library on board and references and user guides for Alpha Cloud and other things along those. And very important, our release notes are also built into this. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping location there. And as we mentioned last week, one of the cool things is our new universal installer. and we highly recommend people start utilizing that system. I use it all the time. For instance, you'll notice here that I updated my build on Tuesday, and there's already a new one for our nightly build. I'm not going to do that right now, but if I wanted to, I just click update, and boom, I have the latest version, and then I click launch. Really simple, using it a lot. It helps me stay up to date on all the pre-releases, which I help do testing and validation and do demos with. But also you'll notice I have my stable build, which is, this is the one I'm using day to day. And you can see that, it, 7279, but actually on that stable build, that last one would have been an update there. And I can maintain both. And when I click launch, I'm going to launch into the proper one and be using the proper environment. So use that universal installer. It's really nice. Once you download it, it updates itself, and I'm just finding fabulous things there. There are so many really cool things happening in development right now. I tell you, there are some really critical, incredibly powerful capabilities coming down the road that we're going to see in Q1. And we're already starting to build some of the training and some of the demonstrations and other things around it. It's just going to be an exciting Q1. There's just some massively cool stuff coming there, along with all the continual updates, improvements, et cetera, that have been going on along this. So we got a great 2021 setup and a lot of really cool capabilities that are coming down the road. And if you attended the DevCon, there's some really good videos with our roadmap that kind of show you what is coming. So with that, today I'm going to talk about some developer environment features, and in particular around the database system. There's some features that have been in there for some time. I want to touch on those really quick, just remind you that those are there. But also beyond that are some really cool new little features that help make life a little simpler and make your life a little simpler. And it involves around managing and interacting with databases. So reality is 99% of all of our solutions connect to a database in some way, shape, or form. That's a key critical capability. And there's a rich set of capabilities built into Alpha that allow you to do that. And I'm going to touch on those today. Well, the reason I kind of provoked this was, I have to stall because the other things people asked in guides, I honestly have to work on and get those done. So no, but I do want to do a good job on those. So I don't want to rush it. I'd rather have a really good demonstration for everybody, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But beyond that, more importantly, is I had a very interesting situation. This was 3 days ago. So I was working on a project, on-site project, and they had SQL Server, and I needed to do some things on the database. And for that particular environment, it's a pretty locked down environment. I went into the SQL Server and I couldn't connect through the MS SQL Server Management Studio. So things like just editing a table. I wanted to add a table and I wanted to change a couple fields and do other things like that. I couldn't do the traditional way. There was a security issue. I had to get someone to help me out with, but I had a deadline that I needed to get stuff done. And then I realized, you know what? I'm still able to connect to that database within Alpha because it had saved all the credentials and other things like that. So everything was set up properly. And I said, you know what? I'm going to use the Alpha tools to do that. And inevitably, it worked. And I was able to get my stuff done. I now have re-access through the SQL Studio Management Studio. Again, it's not a replacement for that, but I was able to kind of do a workaround just because of some of the key features in the Alpha system. So first, the number one thing I want to show you, which I'm sure you've seen and a lot of people are going to be knowing it, is under the Tools menu. I'm at the Web Projects Control Panel. You'll see that at the very top, there's 3 areas: Explorer, Query Engine, and Command Window. So I want to show you these 3 ones and then go into another little feature that has just been recently added. So first, I'm just going to go into Database Explorer. So again, I'm at the Web Projects Control Panel, and I go to Tools, Database Explorer. And in a moment, you'll see it opens up a little interface right here. Let's just, okay. So you can see in here, I have all of my different connection strings that I have created for my system. Often you'll have 1 or 2, but in my case, because this is kind of a demo system, I have a bunch of different ones here. So by clicking here, it's going to show you those connection strings, and then I can sit there and click this little plus button, and it'll show me tables and views. And then I click there and I see tables. So this is, think of it as kind of like an inspector for your database. It allows you to actually look into your database through the connection string and be able to view it. And in fact, which is kind of cool, I can actually see the structure of that. meaning what are the different fields or the columns that are in that database table? What are the types, whether they're like primary keys, not null, etc. So it's really nice just if you're like, oh, I forgot what's the name of that field, or I want to get this right here. You can very quickly use the Database Explorer, and it's in the Alpha system. I don't have to launch another system. I don't have to get another piece of software. I can do all those pieces here. I'm going to mention one piece of software, and again, make no money off it, but I find it's really cool, and I'll explain it in a few, or at the end of this. Just a recommendation if you're doing like hardcore deployments and other things like that, you'll find very handy. So you'll see right immediately, I can see the database or the database structure, both tables, and I can see views. So I can see the views in there. Now, another cool feature of this is that I can right click on something and I can click drop table. Highly recommend you be careful on that. That literally will delete the table. Don't want to do that. But I can sit here and do some things like show data in table. And in a moment, it's going to run a select all query, select star, and I can see the data in my table. So again, I can do these really quick things to kind of look at the information without having to go get another tool. I can actually go in here and I can look at things like, I can do this, and I'm going to come back to this is what I use to do the create table kind of scenario in a few minutes here. So the other thing that's kind of cool is I can actually say this is different types of table for local. This is kind of traditional old school stuff, but it is still there. And sometimes that is handy to be able to do these kind of scenarios here. But I love the Database Explorer because it's fast. Basically, you open it up, hit refresh, and then you can see your database. So if you forgot what's the name of that field or how's that table structured, or let's say it's a new system that you're picking up, you can use it to kind of learn what what that system looks like, and it's fast. And also you're seeing it from within Alpha. So this is how Alpha sees the table and that data, what kind of fields it's using, what the length of those fields and stuff. Because like I've had some things like there, old school like databases had like very short fields, like, oh, we're only going to give you 15 characters. I mean, most modern databases are a little more flexible because they're just so big and speedy. But sometimes I've had errors where it like will clip things off and stuff, and I'll go in here and say, oh, you know what? It's a character field. It's limited to 15 characters. I should smack around whoever built this database, but in that I can then go modify the database and fix it from there. Now, in my particular situation, I kind of knew the database, but I needed a new table. So what I did is I can go actually into tools and go into the SQL Command Table. Now, this is another capability here, and this is kind of cool. So as you can see, we have our connection strings here, and we have all our different ones there. And then you'll see we have SQL type, either portable or native. And if you're not familiar with that, Alpha uses a portable version of SQL. That means we can write code that is ANSI, which means it will work with all databases that support the standard SQL. But also, if you need to do something native, you can actually use native. So you're kind of locking yourself into a single database, but like pivot tables and SQL Server and stuff like that. But now what I can do is I can go right in here and I can go select star from customers. So this is a standard SQL, and there, it's going to run that standard SQL and show me the results here. So again, I can use this within here to write little queries to say, you know what, I was doing this example. I wanted to do select star from customers, and I was saying, how would I do it if I go where customer ID in, and if you're familiar with in, it's just a native, it's a command for doing searches. I can execute it and that's working. So now I go, oh, you know what? Now I know exactly how I should format my SQL command for my thing I was doing later on. And more importantly, I could actually see to make sure it's returning the results that I didn't have anything wrong. So the SQL command window is very, very nice. It supports all the SQL commands. So you can do drop table, insert table. You can do all those kind of things. It shows you a command history. So it has a history here. If you want to go back and do something, you can go ahead and reload that from the history there. You can insert stuff into here. So it's a lot of fun stuff there. And more importantly is that I can go and pick a different database and do something else from there. So this is called the SQL command table or function, and it's built into it. And again, the nice thing is that it allows you to very quickly be able to just use standard SQL if you're comfortable with that. to write some queries and do some stuff within the alpha environment. You don't have to jump out and do stuff within another tool. You can just do it right there. Now, another cool feature here is this one. And this is what really provoked my conversation today. It was like, oh, you know what? I need a new table in my database. And I need it now for something I needed to get done. And I didn't have access to my traditional tools. So I said, okay, I'm going to use this feature within Alpha. So I clicked Create SQL Table. It opens up this interface here. So it's a wizard interface, really nice, super easy to use, and works like a charm. So first I'm going to select my connection string. So let's do there. And then I'm going to click, I could create a new access database. That's if you're doing something local or kind of still using access. But in my case, I'm going to do connection string. Then I go here. So now this is my second part of my wizard where we're going to define what are the fields I need on my table. So I'll just do a real simple here. I'll say my first field is called ID. It is type numeric, and it is a primary key. I'm not going to allow num or null. It's a primary key. Oop, I don't want that. And then I can make it the width and other things like that. And then I can then add another field. And I'm just going to go ahead and call that one name, character field, and let's say it's 256. So basically go through, set up my table structure here. I go here and call it my webinar table. Go here and say create table, and boom, it would write the code, the SQL code to insert the table and create those fields the way they are. Now I can actually click here and see this is what it would do for me here. So you can see it creates this little SQL script, ANSI standard, that allows you to do it. And so I was able to quickly create my my table, get it working, started inserting data, set it up with a grid, or in my case, a list control, and off to the races I went. So super duper handy. And if you want to, you could just copy this and then take it into the SQL Command table, alter it, do whatever you want to. But as you notice, it does all the heavy lifting for me because it just says, you know, how are these going to be? Actually, as I do fields, I can move them up and down to have them created in a certain order. And we can always see what that table statement is going to be that's going to be used by Alpha. And it works great. And what's kind of cool is if you're, I don't know if you're going to do this, usually other tools, but you could actually export this, and it basically exports this information so I could recreate this table down the road. Probably at that point, you're kind of well beyond what you want to do. This is sort of I call it a kind of a quick and dirty environment that allow me to do things that I couldn't do because I didn't have access to other elements or other tools that are there. So that's called the Create Table in SQL Database. Works great. Will save your tail if you don't have access to a third-party tool. I use, by the way, my go-to tool is Navicat. I really like that. It's especially when I'm generating queries. They have a really nice query builder. But I'll talk about another cool tool in a few moments that does a couple other things that I think are insanely powerful. Okay, so that is the Create Table in SQL Database. So again, we have a cool set of tools. We have the Database Explorer, we have the SQL Command Window, and we also have the very cool Create SQL Table. But there's one other one I want to show you that's just really kind of nice. It's called the SQL Query Genie. And let me open that up. And this one's really handy, especially as your database gets a little bit more complex and you need other things like that. So you'll see here that we've opened up our environment. Up top is a set of icons that we're going to use in a few moments. In the middle is our builder. You can see it's going to actually show me what SQL is being built so I can copy, paste, etc. And we can actually preview the results. So first and foremost, up in the left-hand corner, we have the connection, which connection it is. So I'm going to go here and do a demo Northwind. And then I can, if I never need to, I can refresh it here. And so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a table to my query. So I'm going to click here and say add table. Okay. So this is going to now tell me, okay, what tables are in my database. So I'm going to go ahead and click customers. And so you'll notice that it started to build up top here, selected tables and your query here. And in fact, what I can do if I want to is go up here where it says execute query, click there, and boom, I can immediately see the results of my query, which is kind of nice. And again, I could have just done a SQL star, in the command window, but let me show you where this gets very interesting. So first I can say, you know what, I don't want all those columns. So I'm going to go into the column section here, and you'll notice that we have selected columns, available columns, and properties. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'll empty it out here, and I'm going to go, I want the customer ID, the contact name, and the title. So you'll notice immediately down below, it's building my SQL query, and I can then say execute query. Boom, customer ID, contact name, contact title. And right here is my query I can copy and paste. Let's say I want contact title second. Boom, execute query. There's my situation right here. And you'll notice that it altered my SQL select statement to match what I wanted from there. But where it gets really fun is I'm going to go ahead and add city in here. I can now go to filter. So you'll notice I don't have any filter criteria on here. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say, it's asking me what field I want to put in there. So let's say it's city is equal to, and in here I'll say Berlin. And you'll notice, and not to be redundant, but it's building that SQL query here. I can actually execute it. And, oh, not connected to the database. Let's try that again. I don't know why it's not connected. But you'll see down below.
You need to put quotes around Berlin, single quotes around Berlin.
Oh,
value expression. I think there's like a little bit of a unexpected behavior there. Yeah.
Oh, good eye. I wonder, it just, yeah, it's something. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, it must have been gotten in a state, but you'll notice it worked now. We do city equal to Berlin. It comes from there. By the way, that helps you make sure your command is correct. Mm-hmm. Now I can have this and use it in my system, so I know I can actually create more complex. So you'll notice over here, I'm going to say or, and I'm going to put in here London. And so you now notice there's my new clause where it says, and notice it's using the in clause, Berlin or London. But I can also do some really cool stuff where I can have like nested stuff where or city is equal to, oh, it's on this one and there. But you can do stuff which is kind of cool. Let's try something else. Let's go ahead and do where or let's see, customer ID is equal to alpha key. And let me get rid of that. Okay. So now notice what it's doing. It's building a where clause with the first group with anded there, or I can sit there and say or and or. And this should then it should give me everything, you know, I guess alpha key is in Berlin, so this isn't a good example, but you can see it's building this up there. Now note also I can go in here and do order, and I can say, for instance, order by company name, and I'd like to change the direction. So I can do it up or down. You notice when I click this change direction, it shows that error is there, and it puts in my order stuff there. It's change direction, notice it's descending. So the cool thing is you don't have to learn a lot about SQL. You know, you can actually visually build your query, and then you can save this query and restore it anytime, and then copy it and use it and other kind of things there. Super handy and nice, and it's very visual. Where it gets even more powerful is that if you want to add another table and do parent-child relationships and then do links, you can do that in here too. So really cool. Again, not a substitute for something like Navicat or stuff like that, but you can do an enormous amount with this built in, and you know it's all working within alpha, so it's going to work out really well for you and be able to do all the things you need to do. So, oh, I'm sorry, was there a question or?
Nope, I got
been here. Thanks. Cool. So as you can see, there's these really cool tools in there that I have used personally that I really like. And they're in a pinch, they can take the place of a third-party database management tool, not do everything it can do, but do a lot of the nice little features that you have from there. And again, that's the Database Explorer, SQL Query Genie, SQL Command Window, and then also the Create SQL Table. Now, I do want to show you one other thing, which is kind of cool. Is built into it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I can interrupt you for a second. If you could go back to that Query Genie, Can we take
You
a look
got it.
at maybe building some nested queries or maybe adding another table or something like that? Like, let's
Yeah,
say
so
I
let's say I
wanted to
have another
see
table.
customers with orders that were above, I don't know, $100 or something like that.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna delete all my filters. So I'm kind of
All
go back
right.
to a
Yeah.
clean scenario.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna get rid of my order and get rid of that. Okay, so notice I'm back to basically just select star, make sure that works okay. Yeah, select star. So now I'm gonna go back to tables. I'm going to add another table into my query builder and I'm gonna use orders. And I'll click next. Now, the question is it joined or not? And the answer is yes. In this case, there is a join. So I'm going to click there and say table is joined.
That,
And
you click table is not joined. There you go.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad. So I look in my customers table, what is the field there? And then my orders table, I pick that foreign key. Now it's smart enough to initially default to if it's the same field name, it goes, oh, okay, it's probably the link. So in this case, it's saying any orders with customer ID is linked to its parent there. And then I could do that on multiple parts, and I can also do join type. So in my case, what I'd like is not an inner join, I want a left join. And it tells you kind of how to do this. It says include all records from customers and only those records from orders where the join fields are equal, which is what I would like. So you can change the type of join you want to do so that you get the right information. Like I don't want just things that are in there, but I want all customers whether or not they have orders. So little things along those lines there. So now I can go finish and I'm going to go to my columns. And you notice I only have my customer columns, but what I can do is now go to orders and say I want to have my order ID here. And so I'm going to remove some of these things because I don't really need them. There we go. Okay, so this is my command and let's see if it works okay. There we go. So you'll see I have my customer and my order ID linked. So you can see customers have multiple orders. So let's do a few other things. Let's go ahead and do, there's no values in this, so I'd actually have to go in, add another table because of the way this is structured. And it's going to be linked to orders. And again, it's order ID. And I'm just going to do the same join type so I'm consistent. Okay. Now I'm going to go to my columns now, and I want to make my order details, and I want to make unit price and quantity. And let's say discount. So now when I execute the query, it's doing for every order, it's showing me the items that are part of that order. So you can see alpha key, order, there's 3 line items. Here are the line items here. And now I can go in and do filters and other things like that. So for instance, I can say, let's go ahead and say, in our case, what we want is unit price is, let's say, is greater than, let's see, how come it's there?
That's weird. Try use after. That is.
Yeah, let's do after because I think that's going to be.
It's going to put in a greater than sign anyway. Yeah.
Let's see what it does there. That's the where clause. Let's see what it builds down here. Yep, that looks right. It's just a nomenclature thing. There we go. So now you notice I ran that thing, but you'll see it reduced it so I'm only seeing things with unit prices over there. And it wrote all this SQL for me, all of that for me with doing all the joins and everything else. So it's good to go there. And then I can copy, paste it, save it from there. So you can see it's very powerful, very easy to use, little nomenclature issue there, but really kind of cool. That's an excellent example. Thank you for bringing that up.
Cool. I happen to love, it does have a quirk or two, as you saw, but I happen to really like this, and I use this tool almost every week. And I do have Navicat, which I do enjoy as well, but this actually works out quite well. The nice thing about Portable SQL, Portable SQL is actually Alpha's own version of SQL. We created our own version of SQL because no 2 versions of SQL were the same. We discovered that what SQL Server used and what, say, MySQL used were similar, but not exactly the same. So common things like select star from customers would work, that they both speak the same dialect. But when you do things like concatenate fields together and stuff, the syntax is a little bit different. So by creating Portable SQL, we created one sort of standard, And then when you have to do something like a concatenate or something like that, it knows the proper syntax for each of the databases down the line. So it knows, oh, I'm connecting to a SQL Server database. I need to format the SQL just a little bit differently by the time it's execute than if it went to MariaDB or something like that. So it's
very
it is
cool.
pretty cool. But if you ever find a case in which, you know, this really should work and I'm not getting the query back, you know, this is one of those times where you contact guides at alphasoftware.com. We make sure that the database that you're connecting to and what we think the syntax is in fact the syntax behind the scenes. Sometimes as databases change, syntax changes as well, and we do stay on top of that.
Yeah, and again, if you need to, you can always drop in Alpha supports native. So if you're doing like stored procedures or something like that, you can actually tell Alpha, hey, in this situation, use native, and I'm going to give you the native, and it will just pass that through to the database. So you're never going to be stuck with, oh, I can't do it because it's not supported by Portable SQL.
Cool. So we have a couple of questions while we're still here on this
do.
screen. One is, can arguments be used? And the answer is not on this screen. We're gonna trust that you're not going to do a SQL injection attack against yourself on this screen, as opposed to if it was in an app. But that actually leads me to the other question, which is someone said, what happens, can you tell, they've heard about SQL injection attacks. I also just mentioned it, but someone brought it up before. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe not this, maybe you want to cover something else, but if we could get to that as a subject a little later on today, that would be terrific. Explain what the danger is and how Alpha gets around that danger when you go into a production database.
Gotcha. So I'll cover right now. It's a very interesting problem. And it came from when people started to use code to generate queries against the database. So a classic example is I have a user interface that says enter the quantity. So let's say, and I'll just use :quantity. So I've written this SQL command here. And then what I will do is I will say, okay, I'm going to pass in a quantity. So then I create a screen, and on there it has a field, and in there they're supposed to put a quantity. And you know, they'll put in 100, and then it runs and gives back there. Well, script kiddies found out that, you know what, if the programmer's not safe, I can actually put anything in that field. So instead of putting 100 in here, I literally can say select star from passwords or from users or something like that. So in the screen that inputs it, they would actually just put this text, and the program would just pass that along as a argument, well, not an argument, but as text in the SQL query. And sometimes, depending on what happens, is the SQL engine would say, oh, I see this, I'm going to go ahead and execute that. And then on the screen, instead of coming back with a list of these, it would come back with a list of passwords or usernames or social security numbers or zip codes or something like that. So we came up with a concept of an argument. And what an argument is that instead of taking that raw data from the screen and then doing like a concat and putting it into a SQL statement, you actually put it into an argument, and then Alpha does the argument substitution for you. And during that process, it says, oh, you know what? This argument is a numeric. So in this case, it's expecting a number. If they type in select star from passwords, then we're going to say, no, it will throw an error saying, I can't populate that argument because you're not giving me a number, you're giving me a bunch of text. So therefore, they can't play this game of kind of passing in information there. And there's a few other things it does to make sure that it maintains consistency. So when you're using SQL commands inside Alpha, you always want to use arguments and load up arguments, because Alpha, instead of concatenating a SQL string together, Alpha will actually take your SQL string and substitute the values in, and during that process, confirm that someone's not playing a game there. So you're much safer because you're going to prevent these kind of SQL injection attacks where people are using it to grab information and peek behind the scenes. And it was a really big problem for a while. I mean, most people in PHP, especially in PHP, would just take that value and concatenate it to SQL, send it to the database, and whatever came back, they display on the screen. And people found very quickly, that I can find a lot of good data. They wouldn't know exactly, but they'd maybe call that 100 times with different passwords, user names,
Yeah.
you know, and just
Or
pound
send
against
in
the system.
queries that get them to list out all the tables, and then you
Yeah,
go,
and
okay, that's
also if you
yeah.
were using a standard technology, those table names are structured and, you know, there's industry standards, so they could pre-guess kind of what your tables are, like WordPress and other things like that. They kind of knew, ooh, that's where the information is held, and they were able to do command. And it was a big problem, but we kind of looked at it and said, okay, we got to prevent that. And so arguments are your primary way to get to prevent people from abusing your wonderful system. We don't like abusing our wonderful system.
Cool.
Yeah.
And if I could bug you with just one more question before
No.
we
It's
go in,
great. I hope people are
the
finding it.
I know exactly. It's lively today. I always like that. So you had talked about stored procedures. Can you
Yes.
explain briefly what a stored procedure is? And then afterwards, can you call a storage procedure from within Alpha?
Yeah. Let's see. Let me pause the screen for a minute so the
Okay.
script kiddies won't be watching my stuff.
They
We do
do.
have script kiddies. So what a stored procedure is this, is that in the old days, you know, when time started, there was SQL. And then so SQL was just purely a dialect, and you had a standard set of structures and people would support that and go from there. Then what would happen would be that people were going, I need more sophisticated kind of programs. Like I need to be able to iterate through a table and find this. Now, often you can use code to do that, but they started to come up with the concept. And my guess is it started with Microsoft or with IBM. They really the genesis of most of this stuff. But it allows you to create little small programs inside of your systems. Let me see if I can find. I'm just seeing if I have a. I'm trying to find an example of one here. Okay. Here we go. So I'm inside Navicat now. Again, much useful for certain things. So in here, you'll see I've got my giant killer demo server, you know, and then in here, I've got a table or a database called demonstration, and I have these things called functions, and these are called stored procedures. So I'll go ahead, click design function, and you'll see that in a moment, this is a very simple one, but basically all I'm doing is select name and ID from inspection. So this is a very simple there. But in here, I could write hundreds of lines that are doing things like read this table, update this, modify this, etc. So it's a way of encapsulating essentially a bunch of SQL commands to do a function within your database. And there's a couple benefits of it. There's pros and cons. Some people say never use stored procedures. Other people say no, use stored procedures. The stored procedures are nice because kind of once they work really well and they're solid and they're fast because everything happens on the server. There's no communication between the SQL database itself. It's churning inside there. So for certain things, it's like hyper fast. And so it's really handy there. Other is once it works, it kind of works. I mean, it just functions and they're very solid once you got them working. Problem is they can be arcane. The language you use to create them are different for different technologies. You have T-SQL for SQL Server. You have other dialogues. They're all differently. So you have to, and they're arcane. They're not as simple as XBasic or even JavaScript or any of these kind of things here. So more and more people are going away from them, but there's huge amount of systems that use them. And again, they're supported, they're industry standard, they're fast, and they're good to go. Now, the cool thing is once I've created this, there are inside of and let me see if I can, let's see which tools. Let's go to let's look at one. Yeah, see, maybe I do have that. Oh, let's try that one. Okay, I have my connection demonstration. So we're going to do this. Okay, so we're going to go Tools, SQL Command there. And actually, to test this out, what I'm going to do is go back into Navicat. And so you want to call this. So I'm going to call this, and that's the result that came back. So you can see I ran this little stored procedure, and this is the information that came back. So I'm going to go ahead and create a query here. And that query is going to be, and I'm just testing it in here before I go into alpha, but I can say call SP drop down. And I think that's all I need to do. Yep, there it goes. So this is how I call that. So I can go now take that information, go back into here, and I'll put it right here and watch. I'm going to do it like this first. And it says success. Do I see any data there? It ran it. It accepted it. Let's try this. Well, this is probably a bad example because it's not showing the actual results. Oh, there it is. Oh, no, that's my other one, my older one. But it's success. But what I can actually do is, so now I know this command here in XBasic, I can actually issue that as a command and get the results back. If you're interested, I can try and do it really quick. Let's go ahead and go XBasic. Let me see what happens here. Okay. SQL query. Oh, I don't have that. Yeah, I don't have my current thing on here. I don't want to get too in the weeds. But the bottom line is it allows you, what it allows you to do is first, it allows you to encapsulate a set of SQL into a sort of a program or module. Then that can run inside the database. It's very fast and very solid. And then inside of Alpha, you can use that call. For SQL Server, it's like exec, EXEC. And then you can use that to say, okay, trigger this and do something inside the database, and it happens there. One of the benefits is now you don't have a whole bunch of XBasic code that you have to run on that. It's going to be faster and things along those lines. So that's a little bit of the intro. I hope that's enough to kind of get you whet your appetite. Again, there's a huge discussion in the industry of whether, you know, I should put any kind of programmatic stuff in my API layer. But again, you might have speed issues because if it's complex, it may have to call, get a list of records, run through those rankers, and then do some other stuff. If it's inside the database, it all happens there, and it's insanely fast. I mean, I've had situations.
And that's sort of a good argument for it, is that you take the load off your Alpha server, or if you're running Alpha Cloud, you take the reduce the usage requirements there, and you put it back onto the SQL Server database, which is really meant for doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
But the disadvantage is you can't see it unless you dig into the database and see what those things are. It's not everything in one place anymore.
Yeah, and it will make your XBasic cleaner because you like are passing a parameter. The only other thing you realize is with stored procedures, you're locking yourself into a database. So you don't have database portability because a stored procedure on SQL Server is called differently, is written differently, has different commands than on T-SQL versus Postgres versus stuff. Although, interesting enough, that, for instance, AWS just announced at their last event that they use Postgres for their kind of standard database. It's a really good database, very hardcore there. They actually now will translate Microsoft SQL Server T-SQL stored procedures into something that Postgres can understand automatically. They're trying to get more people to move over onto their environment. So I think you're going to see a push towards kind of like genericized stored procedures in the future. But some systems have very sophisticated, cool features they built into them, like Oracle especially has some really cool commands that nobody else has for like data integrity and stuff. But again, if you're going down that road, you're probably committed to Oracle and you're going to stay on that. So cool stuff.
So we had a question about Navicat this time, and the question is, does it support MariaDB? Do you want to talk a little bit about how
yes, it does.
Navicat is sold?
Supports
so you can buy, like I was kind of
Postgres, Maria, Mongo.
So you can buy those separately, but it looks like Dion has the premium edition, which cost a bit more.
Yes, because I'm a premium solution engineer.
It's in my title. Premium solution engineer. I, a lowly product manager, have access simply to the MariaDB. That's the one that I tend to use, and I do like it. But yeah, so depending on, it costs more to get the big one, but if you're only using one database, you might use that. There are some that are automatically built in, like I think all those service ones come with every edition of
Now I do want to show one other tool I use, and I want to show it for a particular reason. And again, I don't get paid by these guys or anything like that. So it's called DB Forge Studio, and I think it's maybe a touch pricier than Navicat. But the thing it has that I think is the most powerful thing it's got, where is that? Here you go. Database compare and sync. So what this allows you to do, which is really cool. Now, when you get going, you're going to have your development database, you're going to have your staging database and you're going to have your production database. What you can do in here is, and Navicat does it, but I don't like how Navicat does it. It doesn't do a good job. For whatever reason, I've always had a hard time with Navicat's database compare tool. But basically it says, here's my current database. This is the one I'm going to, and it can compare the two and tell you what are the differences. So let's say you're developing a new system and you've added 3 new columns to this table. You've added an index and you've done like a view to support a new feature. Well, that's in your current database, like your development database, but now you got to move that over onto your production database. And you have to do it in a way that you don't screw stuff up. Well, what you can do is you can tell this, it will compare the 2 databases and says, okay, here are the differences. Once it identifies the differences, it says, which ones do you want me to care about? Because you might say, oh, I'm only doing this time. And it will actually generate a SQL script for you that you can run on the target database to update it so it looks like the current database. And it's non-destructive, meaning that it won't drop tables and do other things to screw you up. And so it's that feature alone is why I bought DB Forge Studio, because again, it really, when you're in this situation where you've done a bunch of work, you go, my databases are out of sync. How do I get them in sync? This tool works really, really well for that.
That is awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so another question we have, and someone said, you know what, I don't like playing around with my production database. I prefer to have a test database first and then, maybe copy that over once I have it working, and which is actually a really good plan.
Yep.
You should have a separate databases for test and for production. The
Correct.
question is there anything that Alpha can do that can make that your life a little bit easier in that respect? And
well,
and
the number
so
one
that's
thing
actually,
it does.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah. Number one it does is the concept of connection strings. So a connection string basically is a pointer to a database saying, here's my database, here's the type of database, here's where it's located at. So let's say I'm working in development. I have a connection string here called CONN, and it's connected to my development environment, my development database, and I do all my work there. Now I'm ready to put my system out in the wild, but I don't want them pointing to my database, my development database. I want them pointing to my production database. So when you go to the publishing profiles here and you create a new publishing profile, you have what's called named alpha DAO connection strings. And you can see there's a bunch of them here, but what it does, it tells you what your connection strings and says, when I go to use CONN on, in this case, Giant Killer Demo, my server or Alpha Cloud, this is the connection string I want you to use. So the cool thing about that is you don't have to manage multiple connection strings, one for each of your databases, dev, production, staging. You maintain one connection string, but then when you publish it, you substitute so that when it's running, it points to your production or your staging database. Now, if you've modified your development database, and that's what I was kind of talking about, it's up to you to keep the databases in sync separately. Alpha's not going to do that for you. But the cool thing now is then I can just say, I'm working locally, I publish to my server, boom, it now looks at another database to do all its work. And I don't even have to worry about it. It's just done and works out well.
Now, assuming this structure hasn't changed, say, between test and production, or it's only changed in a minor way that isn't going to really affect much, when it comes to copying data between databases, Alpha has a new feature in this release for copying data between databases.
And tables and stuff. It's really
and
cool.
And tables. Do you want to show that off? Or
I forget where that is. I think it...
Or if you like, we have Sarah on hand.
Yeah, I was going to do that. I'm trying to think where that is. I can explore the database now right within here, which is kind of cool. This is a new feature, by the way, is that when you're looking at
Sarah, do you want to jump in and explain and sort of...
yeah.
I know she's got something she wanted to bring up.
I forget where to access that is.
Oh, I don't know where she went.
I'm here. I'm just triple muted.
That'll do it. Yeah.
It's under.
By the way, is the third mute the cat is sitting on top of the microphone? Is that the third level of mute? Gotta kind of shoot it out of the way.
No, it's the GoToWebinar.
And pull the cat hair out of the microphone before you can get a good sound.
It happens.
No, it's the GoToWebinar interface. The button was covered up. It's under Tools More.
Ah, of course. I knew that.
Export from a SQL database to another SQL database. Right in the middle.
Okay. There we go.
No, not that one. That
By
one.
the way, this is kind of cool. It's all, SQLite's really nice too. I'm going to call on an audible. SQLite's really neat because it's very portable. You can use it on mobile devices and other stuff like that. So play around with that. It's really neat kind of stuff. It's not as powerful as a lot of the other databases, but if you're looking for small information stores, it's pretty handy. But this is the new feature. It's called export from a database to a SQL. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
That's
wrong
not
one.
what it is.
The one right below it.
There we go. And I clicked it. There we go. So I can select let's say my connection, let's say Northwind. I'm going to select my target, which is maybe my demonstration database. I can explore both of them. Like I can go look at my destination here. And then I can say copy tables to target database. Does that ask me which ones
What
they
if
are?
you don't? Oh, take a look at the export all tables check.
Here we go. There we go.
There you go.
So I can pick one.
What it's going to do is it's going to create those tables in the database specified in your connection string. So if you want to make a new database, then you want to click that create new database button,
Gotcha.
which will set up a new connection string and everything for you.
So again, if you want to create like a production database, you already have a development database and you say, I'm ready to go. You don't have to use a third-party tool. You can use this tool here or update it and other things along those lines. Very cool. Very neat feature. Handy. But I really like that SQLite. Maybe we'll do a discussion on SQLite in one of our upcoming webinars. Because
it would be great. The other nice thing about SQLite is it lets you pass around it lets you build little sample test cases of things. And so if you have an issue with it, if you send us in a SQL database as opposed to access to your real data, it just makes it much easier for people to debug and diagnose that. Yes.
I just thought, I'll have to talk to Kurt about Alpha Cloud. Can you just, include a SQL database in your publishing profile? I don't know.
Intriguing. I'm not sure. Yeah,
we'll see. But it's really cool. Where we see SQLite is very handy is that if you have a mobile application, you can include a SQLite database and use it as like an online or an on-device database on your mobile device, and that's kind of cool. It's built into the Cordova wrapper. It has a SQL. You can include SQLite functionality for more sophisticated, like on-device database stuff. But SQLite is very well supported. It's great for demos and stuff because you don't have to worry about setting up a database server and everything else is just kind of there, ready to go. So do take some time to explore. It's really neat. We'll do more of a deep dive on SQLite in the very near future.
Excellent. Cool. Someone had asked before whether or not we have documentation on these SQL features. The answer is yes, and Sarah was nice enough to place those links to the documentation in the chat window of GoToWebinar control panel if you want to grab them. And we have another documentation related question, and someone was asking about SWF files. Some of it used to be, I don't know how current it is now, of our video explanations were recorded using SWF, which is a type of flash technology, which is going to end support for it at the end of this year. So we have, I believe at this point, converted every relevant SWF video into an MP4 video. So the question was, if I still have old SWF files, how do I play them? One player that I've used fairly successfully has been the VLC player, which is free and plays just about everything. But the other thing is, if you do come across a SWF file in one of our tutorials or something like that, please send it an email to guides@alphasoftware.com so that we can replace that SWF file with the MP4 version of it so that it can be played by everyone. We think we've got them all, or if not most of them, but if we're missing any, please let us know. All right, what else we got here for questions? A couple people are cheering the disappearance of the SWF file and Flash.
Oh, I know. It was interesting, Flash. They actually, I think it was this week, they're starting to literally pull it off of machines because of the security problems.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about, and I know we give Flash a hard time. It has a let's call it a checkered past,
Yeah.
mainly because of the security problems and everything else. But YouTube was built on top of Flash.
Yeah.
That system and so it drove multimedia in the web browser far farther than anybody else. So it kind of performed a great service in terms of transforming what you could do in a web browser and what you could deliver in a web browser, which introduced all the different things you see today. So I'm going to say they did an okay job. I'm defending them.
All good things though, right?
Yeah.
I think that's it for questions. If someone wants to sneak in another one. Oh, yeah, someone says, look, the video finder in the Alpha Anywhere program still has a bunch of Swift videos there. So, all right, we will go take a look at those because we do need to trade those out. Next question is there documentation for the beta list calendar layout? Sarah, do you know the answer to that or not?
I don't know the answer
There
to that one.
isn't. So the list calendar layout right now in its current form is, I think it's strictly just JavaScript, and we're holding off on documenting anything because there's going to be an API on top of that we would prefer to document.
There'll be some builders.
So
Okay.
There's built-in documentation in the system for it. If there's something you're struggling with, let us know and we'll help you out.
Yeah. Do you know if that's available right now in the nightly release or if you need a feature key for it?
You still need a feature key for it, but it's really easy to get one. Yeah.
Okay.
You just send us an email and we'll send you the feature key and the information you need.
You just have to know someone. So if you're looking to play around with our calendar beta, send it an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. We're happy to give you that feature key. Thanks.
You have to use the magic word.
Now,
Okay.
Isn't that the magic word is now?
Yeah. Renewal, license renewal.
Wonderful. Well, we are out of questions. If anyone thinks of anything, go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. We're going to be taking a couple weeks off for the Christmas break and New Year's break, or the end of the year break, we'll call it. And during that time, I think Dion might be nice enough to produce us a video, so we don't miss these sessions too badly.
Dave, I would, but I'm waiting to hear the magic word.
Oh, all right, now. Thank you. Could you do it now?
But no, I will put together something, a little treat, something to keep you.
That would be great. Yeah. So
that'll be fun.
Watch. Wonderful. So, hey, thank you everyone for showing up today. Thanks for asking questions. And again, if you've got further questions, go ahead and send them to guides@alphasoftware.com. Dion, thank you very much for presenting, and Sarah, thank you for presenting as well. Hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Have a wonderful end of year, holidays, and New Year. Stay well. Bye-bye.